Everyone probably dreams of falling in love at first sight. But is it really that great? The girl who is destined to receive this ability is called Ariana. She is the illegitimate daughter of an earl and a girl who falls in love with everyone without exception. It hadn't been long since it had happened. Until recently, she had been a regular office worker. She and her only relative, her father, were separated. It was a very difficult time. She was not respected at all at work, and most often not noticed at all, as if she didn't exist. Every day, as soon as she was among people, she had to feel superfluous and alone. Every day, she began to hate her life more and more, for there was nothing good in it. Ariana has often wondered what it would be like to be the kind of person who is loved, noticed, and admired. At the time, all those dreams seemed fantastic and impossible. At some point, the girl stumbled upon the unusual game that started it all. In the game takes place dating, where the participant becomes a noble lady and conquers the three main characters of men with different characters. The game is called Romance in the Rose Garden. At the very beginning, three choices of guys are offered. The first, a prince who really likes to meet and chat with girls. The second option, a guy with a mysterious character, to whom it is very difficult to find an approach. He has no friends and experience in communicating with girls. And the third option, a guy who is a dedicated knight. It is very hard to say that anyone is worse or better than the others. You need to choose one of the three main male characters, and then fall in love with them, and preferably do it as quickly as possible. And of course, Ariana wanted to participate. She read the rules and decided it was definitely better than continuing to be in a horrible reality. Thanks to the virtual game, she will diversify her boring office life, which she has never liked. To begin with, we'll have to make a very important and responsible choice: the appearance and life of the character. The first option, a beautiful lady. She has 3 older brothers. She dodges her father and stubborn attendants to plan a strategy to capture the protagonist. Second option, a noble saint. She is admired by everyone in the empire. She controls the holy knights and thanks to her holy power, can use special abilities. At this point, the girl is already excited. She's starting to like this game. She seems to be happy and enjoying what is happening for the first time. After a while, the girl saw a third option that seemed the most interesting to her. The mystical daughter of an earl, despised by her father, the unplanned and only child in the family. This character is the only one with a high level of difficulty. Since Ariana never looks for easy paths, she did not hesitate to choose this character. The game is so elaborate that a girl has the opportunity to choose the level of attractiveness of her character. Right after that, she set the charm value to max. So far, she doesn't even think about the fact that she shouldn't have chosen such a high level of attractiveness and charm for the character. At this point, a window appeared with a warning that these settings may interfere with smooth gameplay. But the girl doesn't even notice. She's just thinking about getting the game on. After a moment, the girl opens her eyes and realizes that something has happened. She is no longer wearing the special glasses, which means that the game has begun. The girl found herself in a new reality and couldn't believe her eyes. She didn't think it was much more than just a game. After a few minutes, she calmed down and got very excited. She had an amazing feeling like she was in a completely different world. The first thing Ariana did was get out of bed and decided to familiarize herself with her new appearance. She walked over to the mirror and began to admire her reflection. Each second she began to like this new life more and more. She noticed that the graphics are so realistic that it doesn't feel like a game at all. The emotions and feelings can't be distinguished from the real thing. She felt as if this wasn't a game, but a rebirth in a new body. Everything here was exactly like real life. Meanwhile, the assistants came into her room. They had prepared water and clothes for the mistress to change into. As soon as the girl wondered why she needed so much water, the second she did, the helpers poured that water right on top of her. After that, it became clear that the assistants hate their mistress. This happens almost every day. The system mentions being mistreated by the staff, except that's why the game has to start that way. As a friend, they all looked at her as if they saw something unusual. Ariana doesn't realize what's going on since she hasn't even said a word to them yet. She's noticed that right after she looks someone in the eye, the maids start apologizing and become like other people. They begin to admire her looks and try to make amends. One of them wondering that before, they had not noticed the ravishing beauty of her mistress. The girl thought that maybe setting the attractiveness level high at the beginning of the game had been a mistake. She feels that as soon as she looks at someone, everyone, without exception, begins to admire her looks. After a while, Ariana went outside. She has no idea what's next for her. The girl noticed that everyone around her was looking at her suspiciously, as if something was catching their attention. Even strangers, whom she was seeing for the first time in her life, froze in one place and looked at her as if they saw something unusual. At this point, the lady becomes too embarrassed. She didn't expect to attract so much attention from the people around her. With every passing minute, she becomes wary of everyone around her and fears that this is only the beginning of this. All passers-by react the same way. As soon as they meet her gaze, Ariana notices how quickly they fall in love with her. The girl couldn't stand it, and just in case, decided to go back to her room. On her way, the lady was met by an assistant and informed that her fiancé, Lord Richard, had arrived. She recalls that her character does have a fiancé. They're in a contract marriage, so indifferent to each other. I wonder if the guy will be able to remain indifferent after this meeting, because even strangers couldn't pass it by. Meanwhile, the Lord waits for his bride in the drawing room. He reflected that he could never truly love her. It turns out, all this time, he'd been avoiding seeing her, and thought she was one of the most unattractive girls he knew. The guy has confessed this to his fiancée more than once, but it seems that very soon, he will change his mind forever. And he'll think she's the most beautiful girl in the world, the sweetest, loveliest, and most beautiful there is. Meanwhile, Ariana has come into the living room, and as usual, the Lord purposely refuses to look in her direction. He said he's here on a very important case, so they're gonna have to talk about it right now. Just for a second, he accidentally turned toward her, looked into her eyes, and then he couldn't look away after that. It was as if the girl had magnetically drawn him in, and even made him confess his feelings. Richard nonstop started saying many compliments to her, but at the same time, he didn't realize what was making him say it. Now, no matter how much he wanted to, he could never be indifferent to her again. In response, the girl smiled and said that she was too tired, so she didn't have the energy to deal with any important matters. From now on, she won't have to try to get his attention, because now he'll do whatever it takes to see and talk to her. Richard says nice things to her, and right after that, tries to make himself stop doing it. As the girl had postponed this conversation to another time, they said goodbye and went about their business. Finding herself in the room, she was surprised to find that the feeling of fatigue felt truly. Ariana was too tired, so she decided to relax and think about the future and how to get out of the system. The next day, if that's possible, since the girl doesn't plan to stay in this world long. At some point in the middle of the night, she wanted a glass of water when suddenly she felt someone's presence. Ariana opened her eyes and was very much frightened. The girl saw the entire staff in front of her staring at her intently. It looked too creepy to look at. Just thinking about how long they've been here makes her uncomfortable. The girl is afraid to even think about it. Their faces are all the same. They're out of control, and it makes it even scarier to be in the same room with them. They start talking very loudly about her looks and get excited about looking her in the eye. Ariana doesn't know what to do. Stay in this room or try to run away somewhere, because most likely they will start to catch up with her. Their uncontrollable desire to be constantly around begins to be very alarming. The girl has already regretted that she dreamed of becoming very beautiful to other people. It became impossible to be around people like that, so she got up and started running away. Everything going on is like some kind of horror movie. The ladies feel trapped with monsters, but unlike the usual plot where someone wants to destroy the... Here it's the opposite. Everyone admires her looks and can't exist without her attention. They want to hear her voice, touch her hair, and be around her all the time. And that's not all. In addition to the staff, Richard started stalking her. She recognized him immediately and understood that this world is nothing like the cake she envisioned at the beginning of the game. It's not as happy and beautiful as it looked in the picture. Ariana found herself all alone with these country's creatures, in this huge house, no one here to protect her. Each time, their behavior becomes too unpredictable. She doesn't know what to expect from them next. When suddenly, some miracle happened, and there was one normal person among all these people. He said her name very loudly and asked for her to trust him. The girl ran up to meet him and asked him what he wanted from her. It seemed that whatever he answered to that now, Ariana was no longer surprised by anything. The guy said he came to help her. He offered to get her somewhere safe. Since she has no other choice, she trusts him and doesn't fight him. Because he seems trustworthy, Ariana looked at him and tried to figure out if he was really in control of his mind, unlike everyone else. After a while, he led her to some woods. It was much calmer and safer here, if they hid well. No one would find or hear them here. At this point, she's much relieved to find someone who can and wants to help her. But it remains to be seen why they're doing it and where they're going. At some point, she had a strange feeling that words can't describe. And then this guy suddenly starts hugging her, except she doesn't feel it at all. It was as if in a fog, she could see him in front of her, but she couldn't feel his touch at all. Something strange was happening. She was walking calmly through the woods with him, and then a second later, she started falling with him from a great height. It's like a dream, but it feels like something else. Eventually, Ariana started to get very nervous. She feels like she's losing her mind. After every one of these situations, she wants to go back to the world she used to live in. But unfortunately, no one warned about what to do if you want to leave the game or if it's possible at all. Ariana can't take it anymore. She's no longer in control of her emotions because she's afraid that very soon she may be trapped and no one will be able to help her. Sometime later, when she woke up and came home. Fortunately, the knights noticed the staff's suspicious behavior and addressed the problem immediately. By the rules of the game, when a situation like this happens, the characters change. So, the girl gets a new staff. The next day, first thing in the morning, the girl's father called her into his office. Ariana wanted to refuse, but still, she was curious to know what he wanted to talk to her about. It turns out he just wanted to see if she was okay because he just found out about what happened last night. The man was outraged by the behavior of his subordinates and promised that he would try to be more careful in hiring new employees. As suddenly, he looked into her eyes and marveled that today, his daughter looked somehow special. For the first time, in all her life, her father said nice words to her. And as usual, he had a very easy time ruining such a good moment. The man said he probably just imagined it. Ariana wasn't too upset. After all, she was used to this kind of talk. She hadn't expected anything different. At that moment, he also, for the first time, offered to help her. The man asked if she would like to stay in the tower temporarily because there he could control and prevent what happened last night. Although it sounded like a wish to help, the girl took it in a different way. She realized that her father just wanted to lock her in the tower. She had never trusted and would never trust this man, as suddenly, however good he might try to appear at first sight. Afterward, he specifically came over and said she could count on his help. It sounded too out of sincerity. Ariana is sure he's obviously up to something and trying to trap her in it. We can only hope that the girl will think of something, for it may be too dangerous to believe and do what those around her suggest to her. Ariana became convinced that with each successive day, there could be more and more danger and traps. She remembered her past life and realized that even then, she had been much happier than she was now, and at least in control of her life. This can't go on any longer. Ariana pushes her father away and decides that now things will be the way she wants them to be. Even under these circumstances, she intends to be happy and will try to do everything in her power to do so. She told him she needed some time before making that decision. The girl promised that she would be back soon to give a final answer, and then, very quickly, she ran off somewhere. Ariana returned to her room and seriously considered the fact that her future fate depended on her alone. Either way, she's definitely not going to agree to move into the tower, so you have to come up with some plan and explain why she doesn't want to do it. If everything goes according to the rules of the game, there's only one way the end will happen. Then the girl will successfully target the main man, but unfortunately, how things will actually be, no one knows. Anyway, if she has any chance of getting back to her world, she'll try. As suddenly, she heard someone's voice again. She didn't manage to relax, even being in her room. Jack's assistant knocked on the door. He warned that he had not been present in her room last night. So, he being the only one the girl trusted a little more than the others, she asked to come in as soon as she gave the special signal. If you think about what happened to the maids, they were fascinated by her from the moment they looked into her eyes. So one would assume that this problem could be fixed somehow. Meanwhile, Ariana allowed him to enter, and before doing so, safely managed behind the furniture. She warned that during the conversation, they would talk without eye contact. The aide asked no questions and agreed immediately. He said he came to ask about the questionnaire at the Imperial Palace that will be held tomorrow. He needs to know if the lady is planning to go there. The girl answered that it was a very difficult question, for she was incredibly tired and did not know if she could find the strength to do so. The aide explained that tomorrow is the day that the imperial palace opens for the first time in several years. It will be the biggest banquet attended by aristocrats, so it's best not to miss it. In his opinion, if the girl stayed at home, she would regret it very much, so he advised her to think carefully and make the right choice. In addition, she will be able to meet interesting and very respectable people, so you should think very carefully before refusing such an offer. At this point, the girl's only thinking about one thing. She's too unaccustomed to not being approached by someone. It's possible that if she goes to the event, it'll be worse than last night. It is necessary to find out how you can fix this problem, because it may be enough not to fully open your eyes, or to wear some glasses. In the meantime, the evening came. The girl decided that from today, and will have to lock up, so it will be much safer and quieter. Ariana doesn't know what to do, as her only problem is making sure no one attacks her. She hasn't felt safe for days, and what's worse, no one has explained to her what to do about it. As suddenly someone knocked on the door again. The lady was frightened, and afraid to even ask who was behind the door. At which point, this man asked if he could come in, and only then identified himself as her father. Ariana looked at the doors and felt as if there was no way she needed to open those doors. Right after that, this man started trying very hard to open the doors without her permission. It got very loud. Then he said that apparently Ariana was already asleep. Things looked so scary that the girl no longer knew who she could trust, or whether to leave her room at all. Even her father, who had never spoken to her, much less come into the room, was suddenly suspiciously interested in her life. She was once again convinced that she needed to try and escape this house as soon as possible. There was no safety, no peace of mind, no normal life here. At that moment, she has an idea, because thanks to the event, she will have no problem to meet a man. Eventually, he can help her to come or escape from this house. The next day, the day all the people of the Empire have been waiting for. As soon as most of the guests were gathered in the room, they began to discuss some news. Some people have learned that there will be a special girl at this event, but no one knows what she looks like. After a while, Ariana's appearance was announced. As she is the Count's daughter, her appearance is never overlooked. People immediately sensed something and started looking in her direction, but so far, it's been quiet. The girl tried and made her hair cover her eyes, so instead of coming up and admiring her looks, people are as usual unhappy with her presence. Meanwhile, the lady doesn't stop and continues walking to the back of the banquet hall. She tries to remain unnoticed and tries not to look anyone in the eye. But at the same time, no matter how hard she tries to hide, she'll have to meet the main character. Before starting the game, she looked at the guy carefully and remembered his appearance well. So, she should recognize him. Strangely enough, she noticed him very quickly because, as expected, around the guy, there are a lot of girls who want to meet him. This is the guy, Prince Atheon, that she wants. He wasn't as handsome in the picture as he was in real life. I can see why there are so many girls around him. The only legitimate successor to the Empire, with incredible looks, he never needs attention from women. Now that it's easy to find him, we need to figure out how to approach him and start a conversation. When suddenly, just as she started thinking about it, some girl came up to her. It turns out they used to know each other. Natalie noticed that her friend still didn't have a fiancé. She purposely turned the question in to brag about her love life. But in response, in order not to cause trouble, Ariana tried to cover her face and decided to walk away. Natalie was outraged and asked why the girl was ignoring her. She asked her to look her in the eye and explain why she was ignoring her. At that moment, Ariana had no choice. She had to look her in the eyes. And of course, after a few seconds, these people were unrecognizable. They stopped talking and started admiring the color of her eyes. The girls noticed that they were out of control, and it was as if something was forcing them to compliment her. They get really nervous, but there's nothing they can do about it. After that, they asked for the address of the store where Ariana bought this wonderful dress. At that moment, some guy was walking by and happened to look into her eyes. And the second he did, he went over to her and started hugging her. He confessed his feelings to her and said he couldn't live without her. So she became like bait for all these people, all vying for her attention. There was a very loud noise in the hall. Everyone started screaming and running towards her. It's impossible to imagine how Ariana feels at this moment. The girl was trapped with a lot of people gathered around her, when suddenly someone took her hand. It turned out to be Ethan. He asked what was going on here and ordered everyone to move away from this girl. By his side, the lady felt safe for the first time in a long time. He protected her and even managed to calm her down. After that, no one will go near her now. The printer has forbidden them to do so, and warned that if anyone ignores this order, they will regret it very much. And that's not all. The guy noticed that the girl was very scared and decided that she needed to calm down a bit. He suggested she go outside and get some fresh air. Ariana didn't refuse. It was a great opportunity to talk to this man. She didn't even have to think of anything to say. He himself approached her and offered his help. The girl said it was very timely, and she was very grateful to him for that. Because if it wasn't for him, there's no telling what might have happened in front of all those people. At this point, the lady doesn't even think about who this man is, because she has completely forgotten how important the attention of girls is to him. There's no such thing as him hanging out with one girl for more than a few days. He's always missing new acquaintances. Whatever he turns out to be, he's the only one who can help her and solve all the problems that have been building up all this time. Ariana doesn't know how this will end, but for now, it's the only option she could think of. The girl looks him in the eye and tries her best to make him fall in love with her as soon as possible, because that's the only way she could ask him for anything. As a friend, he suddenly took her hand and asked if he could ask her one question. The girl said yes. Ethan suddenly wants to dance with her. I really wonder how sincere that desire is. After that, he kissed her hand and said, though he had no experience, he would be very happy to have his first dance with her. To which the girl replied that she also, not very good at dancing, but with him, she'd love to do it. She doesn't understand if anyone can refuse this beautiful prince. His voice and manners are so mesmerizing that you want to do everything he asks for. At that moment, she felt like a real princess and seemed to fall in love at first sight. Ariana could never have imagined that after a life as an ordinary office worker, she would find herself in another world she would never have believed existed. They began to dance this dance, and before they knew it, they stopped noticing everyone around them. The prince said she was very good at it. The girl thanked and said it was mutual. She started to enjoy this moment, and all because she trusts this man. She's very curious to see if he's affected by her charms or if it's his sincere emotions. Either way, he's behaving very differently from the others. He's much more in control of his behavior. But does that really mean a girl's beauty isn't enough for him to see something special in her? She looked at him but still didn't understand anything. His gaze too neutral. Ariana thought that perhaps it could mean something, because before, everyone, without exception, at the sight of her, stopped controlling themselves and thought that there was no one more beautiful than her. She had a hunch that since this was a virtual world, maybe if she looked somewhere other than her eyes, it would work. The girl started to look at him from all sides, when suddenly the guy asked her not to do that. Ethan is acting too weird. He's smiling, but at the same time his gaze is completely neutral. And what's most interesting is that he doesn't react to her gaze in any way. The prince continues to look at her, and surprisingly, his demeanor doesn't change at all. Ariana doesn't understand why this is happening. He's clearly something special. She's become curious to find out what her secret is. At this point, Ethan explained that he just wanted to help her. If it were any other girl in her shoes, he would have done the same thing. But does that mean her beauty and charm had nothing to do with it? He just did a good deed and protected someone who needed it. Meanwhile, the song ended. The guy looked toward the audience, and at that moment, Ariana decided to take advantage of it. As soon as he looked at her again, the girl was gone. He didn't even have time to ask her name one last time. He still didn't understand why she did it, because there was no way she didn't like it, or that he'd offended her in some way. Ethan began to watch her run away, and from the look in his eyes, he was very curious as to what he had done wrong. Because in all my time, I've never had a girl run away or leave before he does. Meanwhile, Ariana came back into the room and pretended like she hadn't gone anywhere. Now she's on a very important mission to figure out why her charms aren't working for that guy. His gaze wasn't like the rest of the men. He looked at her as if he was watching her reaction. Everything looked like the guy was waiting for something. No matter how hard his girlfriend tried to look at him, nothing was working. Either way, it doesn't stop her. Ariana doesn't give up or even think about doing so. The lady decided to put off winning the prince for a while. She started thinking about other guys, with whom things would probably be much easier. At some point, she started walking around the mansion and noticed a small group of people standing in the corner. One of them turned to His Majesty and asked why he didn't want to meet a girl since he had come to this event. Arnold warned that if they ever tried to ignore his answer again and asked that again, they would regret it very much. The girl looked at him and realized that he was definitely one of the main characters. He's the owner of the richest estate in the empire, a duke who loves money more than anything. Ariana never thought he might show up to the banquet, according to his characterization, for it seems he might not be interested here. Meanwhile, the aides decided to explain their offer, for many rumors were beginning to circulate in the empire that the duke was not interested in girls. They just want to take care of his reputation and make the rumors go away once and for all. The duke heard those words and became even more angry. He was so disgusted to hear it, that the second he did, he jumped on the deputy and tried to destroy him. Ariana was very frightened and wondered what the right thing for her to do in this situation was, because if someone found out she'd listened in on their conversation, there could be a lot of trouble, and she wouldn't be happy about it. The assistant regretted that he had even started to talk to him, because he had been convinced more than once that it was better not to talk to him on such topics. Arnold was so violent that without even thinking about it, he pushed his assistant from a great height. Apparently he hates hearing such rumors about himself so much that the guy is capable of punishing even those who just tried to help. After that, he said he was going home because no one likes to be around people who spread rumors like that. At this moment, the girl is looking at him from the side and now, afraid to imagine what might happen if he sees her now. I think it's the second of the three men who don't seem to fit. The girl is afraid to even talk to him, let alone offer him anything. Unfortunately, she has no other option. She'll have to talk to at least one of them, no matter how hard and scary it is. If she misses this chance, there's no telling when she'll get to meet these people again. Meanwhile, the Duke returns home and so far he's in no mood at all. He tries to calm himself down, but when he remembers the conversation with that deputy, he gets really angry. As suddenly, he felt the presence of some person. Arnold immediately turned around to see who it could be. The guy thought it was probably one of his assistants. He started yelling loudly and ordered them to leave him alone. But at that moment he saw a strange girl in front of him. He looked into her eyes and was surprised, for he felt some special energy. Ariana caught up with him on purpose, but pretended like she was just passing by. She changed that she scared him and introduced herself as the Count's daughter. The guy looked at her with a thoughtful look, judging from which it was unclear how he would react to this encounter. We can only hope that because he's in a bad mood, at least he won't accuse her of something. For some reason, Arnold didn't answer anything. The girl waited a few more minutes, but he still continues to ignore her, as if he's purposely trying to ignore her presence. Ariana wondered if perhaps he didn't care enough about her right now, that even her appearance didn't cause him to react at all. At that moment, the girl remembered that she had to do it, and at the same second, sprang into action. She moved closer to him and first of all, gave him a few compliments, and then offered to dance or just socialize. He took his hand at once, however, acting as usual. He thought it was another girl who wanted to meet him. Since that didn't work, she moved even closer to him and made him look her in the eye. She needs to make proper eye contact. Immediately afterward, she asked how he was feeling at that moment and whether he had noticed anything unusual. Arnold became nervous and refused to answer these strange questions. Afterward, he pushed her away from him and did not notice that there was a small fountain quite close by. Ariana couldn't stay on her feet and unfortunately fell right into the water. She realized that the guy clearly wasn't going to talk to her. He was in too bad of a mood. The moment she was in the water, he silently turned around, didn't say a word, and just walked away. Surprisingly, he just pushed her into the water, though he could have been much more aggressive. When he suddenly stopped and thought about something. The girl realized that her impatience had made her look too pushy. She was actually very lucky. The Duke had held back and barely hurt her, though usually in these situations he wasn't as calm as she had seen him to be. Left alone, she suggested that perhaps charm could work for all but the main male characters. The main characters in this game are too unapproachable. It's very hard to get to know them, even with a high level of enchantment. It makes it a lot harder. But for now, the girl's not giving up. She's down to her last character. At that moment, she heard the voice of some guys. The girl looked in their direction. Turns out they just heard the noise and came to help. One of them asked if she was okay. As soon as they got close enough to look her in the eye, they stopped controlling their behavior. The guys started acting exactly the same. They stopped being different. Since the girl is used to this kind of thing, this time, her reaction is much calmer. But it doesn't seem that way at all. Eventually, she couldn't stand it and started screaming very loudly, and afterwards, ordered them to get away from her immediately. This one moment, some guy came up to them, heard her screaming and decided to help. Ariana hadn't expected someone to come to the rescue so quickly, but either way, this was a very good thing. This guy's name is Roger, and somehow, amazingly, he was in the right place at the right time. This is exactly the guy who is the third main character. It's impossible to believe that such an incredible coincidence has happened. On the one hand, the girl is very happy to see him, but on the other hand, she doubts that she will be able to make friends with him despite his help. Because judging by the previous guys, no matter how easy and beautiful things are at the beginning, it doesn't mean they'll be the same at the end. With his appearance, these guys start making excuses and convince him that they just wanted to help this beautiful lady. Then one of them came even closer to her, and without permission, started touching her. Ariana became very uncomfortable. She didn't think that trying to meet the second guy would end this way. She felt for the first time what it was like to be without an outlet when her safety didn't depend on it. If Roger hadn't come now, the girl is afraid to imagine what might have happened without his presence. She really hopes he'll take her home and not leave her alone with these people. Meanwhile, the guy reminded them that when someone touches the nobles, they are bound to receive the appropriate punishment. So he gave them some time and offered them two options. They could apologize and leave or be punished personally by Roger. All three of them chose the first option. They ran right away and stayed here for a second. They got really scared because usually Roger always keeps his word. At that moment, Ariana seemed to fall in love with him at first sight. She even forgot to thank him for rescuing her. She wondered if it was customary here to do something in return for such help. The guy asked if she was okay, to which the girl replied that she was very grateful. But unfortunately, she's so badly frightened she can't even get out of the water. Her legs are too weak. Without a second thought, Roger walked over, took her in his arms, and asked if there was anything else he could help her with. Ariana tries not to show her emotions, although in fact, she is starting to admire this man more and more. He acted like a real man. Meanwhile, he found a nearby bench, motioned for her to sit down, and began asking her a lot of questions. Apparently, he's really interested in how Ariana's doing. He won't leave her side. All this time, the girl was silent. And just as he was about to leave on his errand, she asked him to stay a few more minutes, and then hinted that after the water, she was very cold and it would be nice to warm up somehow. Roger offered her his jacket as suddenly, Ariana declined and said it didn't fit her. In response, the guy shared the rest of his clothes, and he seems to understand exactly what the girl is hinting to him about. Ariana hadn't expected him to agree to give her something else so quickly. After all, she just wanted to test what he was willing to do for her. At some point, she felt it was just a fantasy and it wasn't really happening. Roger once again asked if she needed a jacket, since it was the only thing he could offer her. But I told you no. She said she felt very uncomfortable accepting so much help, since he didn't owe her anything, much less give away his clothes. Eventually, she did accept the jacket and said it was the act of a true knight. Then the lady introduced herself and asked what his name was. The guy replied that he was just an ordinary knight just doing his duties. He said he couldn't pass by and not do what he was obliged to do. Ariana hadn't expected him to start downplaying his accomplishments and his status so much. Either way, it was probably for the best. Immediately afterward, Roger began to worry about her health. He advised her to come home soon and have some hot tea. After cold water, the girl risks getting sick. So, in his opinion, it is better not to waste time and go straight to a warm place. He took her in his arms without warning and said he would personally supervise her return home. He started walking very fast and on the way, asking for directions because he doesn't know the area very well. In the end, they decided to call a carriage, because it would be much easier and quicker to get there. He asked the driver to hurry up and leave as soon as possible, to which the man replied that he would do his best to fulfill his request. As soon as the guy said he was going to stay here, the girl got very busy. She asked him to listen to her, because she didn't know when she would have another chance to talk to him. She's starting to hate that lately, having to rush around and not having enough time for anything. In that case, Ariana decided there was only one way to stop him. She has one last chance, and at the very last moment, She asked him to promise that very soon he would come to visit her. The girl said she would look forward to that day. She said he didn't have to answer and asked that his arrival be a surprise. Afterward, she closed the door to the carriage and began to dream that it would happen as soon as possible. Roger was so surprised that he didn't even have time to say goodbye to her. He noticed that for the first time he had experienced some peculiar sensation while talking to the girl. He began to remember where their acquaintance had begun and decided that this meeting was not the last one. She's clearly interested in him and made him think about her all the time. Though he didn't over-control himself, it was obvious during the conversation that he definitely liked Ariana. He started to go about his business and didn't even notice how he kept thinking about her. Roger had never felt such emotions as he did when talking to this girl. He felt that she was special, and without her, he now couldn't, which means she finally succeeded in making this knight fall in love with her. Meanwhile, night has fallen, and even at this late hour, some people don't even think of resting. His Majesty was walking around the grounds. He noticed the aide and started asking about Ariana. The assistant replied that it was not his responsibility, so he didn't know anything about it and couldn't tell you about it. It turns out Arnold has noticed something suspicious. He thinks a strange girl has poisoned him. He feels like he can't live without her, he can't control his thoughts, and he thinks about her all the time. Every time His Majesty thinks of that girl, he gets more angry and out of control. Everything in this yard reminds him of her. He doesn't understand what's happening to him, and seems to do everything he can to figure something out. While talking to the deputy, it was clear he was definitely starting to suspect her of something. The man took the hint and immediately went to find out some information about the stranger. Arnold made it clear that if he didn't, he would be seriously punished. The guy never changed. He continues to punish people for no reason. He doesn't feel sorry at all for people who are not guilty of anything, even if they did everything they could to help him. It turns out he's not the only one who wants some information about her. The first protagonist she meets at the ball also begins to inquire about details of her past life. But that's not the main thing that they're so interested in. For the first time in years, after meeting the girl, Arnold can't stop thinking about her. Usually when he talks or spends time together with some girl, once evening comes, he can forget even the person's name. But this time, it's the other way around. Even after they had said goodbye and she had gone, he wanted to see her again. Without her, he was very excited. The aide replied that Ariana was indeed something special. He had noticed long ago she was different from the others. The guy seriously wondered how she might be different from the others. He memorized her every look, movement, and action she made was in the presence of the... It even seemed to Arnold that this stranger, she is like a magnet. All people near her cease to control themselves. So in order not to jump to premature conclusions, he suggested that we start investigating and find out what she might be hiding. He even allowed to take his time in order to maximize the quality of this case. Because if even the answers, you can miss something very important. The guy never thought any girl could be that interested in him. So far, he sees it as a game, where you have to find someone or declassify someone, because that's really how it works. Meanwhile, the girl is still riding in the carriage. She's very upset that she didn't get to fulfill her plan. None of the three men fell in love with her. She realized that it was these three people that her abilities weren't working for, but so far, she had no idea what that might be or why it was happening. Because if they reacted to her like all the other people, she would easily fall in love with every single one of them. Meanwhile, the next day has arrived. The girl is already dreading what's in store for her in the near future. She woke up early in the morning and for some reason, very frightened, she started screaming like she was having a bad dream. The thing is, as soon as she opened her eyes, she saw a huge amount of flowers in her room. Everything looks like a farewell to a dead person is happening. Flowers everywhere. They crowded her room and the entire huge hallway. Instead of being happy, it brought up terrible emotions. Very suddenly, her father came into her room. The girl was frightened even at his appearance. It turns out all those flowers were sent to her by people she charmed at last night's event. And they also sent a lot of invitations to meet in person at a cafe, or go for a walk. And she's only scared because she doesn't know how to say no to all these people, or at least take the time to do it. Father remarked that among all these invitations, there were special ones, such as those from Roger and the rest of the... Only they all have different intentions. Some want to get to know her better. Some can't bear to stop thinking about her. and some suspect her of poisoning her. Everyone has a different agenda, so you have to think very carefully about whether it's safe before you answer someone. At this moment, when the girl was thinking, her father came up to her and reminded her that it was better not to answer these invitations, for she had a fiancé. Things have gotten a lot more complicated. It seems like the situation is too desperate, and whatever she does now will be wrong. In the end, she did make a choice, and informed her father that she would respond to every invitation, because it's disrespectful to people who are waiting for a response. And the first thing Ariana will do is read 3 special letters, because all the others are of much less interest to her. After some time, the girl cleaned herself up, and decided to head to the mansion of the guy she met at the beginning of the event. She wondered if each of these girls had come to talk about something important, since they were probably all fans who came here every day. 30 minutes earlier, on her way to this mansion, the girl was talking to the man who is helping her get there. In his opinion, the guys who sent her the invitations are very brave, though it's actually Ariana who is brave enough to not be afraid to face them again after everything that happened before. The first thing they started talking about was the prince, who has a lot of admirers and attention from girls. The man does not understand how he could send an invitation, because every day he has a huge selection of the most beautiful girls in the empire. He just doesn't know that really. It's not just about beauty, it's about the abilities that she's interested in each of them. 2 of the 3 guys haven't even admitted to themselves that they liked her. They only want to meet up to find out why they felt so weird after meeting her. Meanwhile, she's standing around all these girls trying to figure out why no one's allowed to see the prince. In order not to stand in line, the girl remembered that she could show an invitation, thanks to which she was allowed to come at any time, and as a result, she was indeed let through without any problems. The other girls were very surprised. They don't understand why someone is let through easily and someone has to wait half a day. They looked at her like something unusual had happened. The assistant asked all these girls to step away from the door and told Ariana to follow him. He would lead her straight to the prince's office. It turns out that behind that door isn't a mansion. It's the entrance to a fancy palace. As His Majesty was now on a walk, she would have to wait a while. The aide promised it would not take more than 30 minutes, because the prince usually never stays longer. He always arrives at the same time. At that moment, Ariana saw some girl. She tried to hold back, but she failed. The girl was so surprised by the beauty of the palace that she couldn't even control herself at this moment. She was embarrassed that a girl she didn't know had just seen her reaction. She laughed and said someone would be next. Ariana still didn't understand what that meant, and decided it was best not to think about it. They did not even notice how at that moment the prince came up to them, and he apologized, for he had kept the guests he himself had invited waiting. Ariana said it was all right, for she was very glad to see him anyway, and afterward asked what about the tea party he had promised in the letter. After a very long journey, she wanted to rest and talk in silence, without strangers. And of course she's eager to find out what he wants to talk to her about, because if the prince plans to offer her a relationship, it's mission accomplished. So far the guy hasn't said anything. He's smiling sweetly, probably waiting for the moment when they'll be alone together, and then the fun will begin. No wonder that after she ran off in the middle of the conversation, he wanted to meet up and find out what it had been. In response, Ariana didn't bother to explain anything. She touched his arm and began to watch his reaction. She made it clear she didn't agree to this meeting to discuss important business. She was interested in his feelings. The prince replied that he wants to get to know her better, which means that there are only 2 possibilities. He either suspects her of something, or he fell in love at first sight and is afraid to admit it. And afterwards, he said that since she agreed to this meeting, it means that his desire is mutual, and she also wants to get to know him better. At that moment, they both heard someone's voice, and in that second, the prince reacted very quickly. He didn't explain anything, and started to hide with her, and also touched her face so the girl wouldn't start asking anything. As suddenly, he did not notice at all that he had touched a sharp piece of jewelry and had accidentally hurt himself. Ariana doesn't understand what's going on, and to avoid making a mistake, she decides to wait and do as he says. It turns out the girls his mom invited her here, so they'd better not show their faces so no one will see them. These girls started talking about Ariana, and now they have no idea that she hears every word they say. Afterwards, someone told them that they had recently seen Ariana on the palace grounds. The girl was very frightened, for it seemed she was beginning to be hated. The prince said that for now, the only thing they should do was to remain unnoticed, for if anyone saw them, there would be a lot of trouble. The prince is sure that if anyone sees her here, the girl will be in danger. She will be followed and never left alone. So he must ensure her safety, at least within his palace grounds. At that moment, Ariana felt how much all these girls hated her. They had been jealous since the moment they let her through without waiting in line. After a few minutes, the girls who were looking for her searched around and decided she wasn't here. Right after that, he let her go and tried to explain that he just wanted to make the best of it. Ariana replied that it was fine. She understood exactly what he was doing it for, so very grateful for that. A little later it was revealed that in fact, the prince believed the rumors and was sure that she was hated for some bad things she had done. The girl explained that in fact, it's not like that at all. Other girls just feel competition and are jealous, because she has a very easy way to fall in love with any man. So it's no surprise that everyone she's seen or knows is trying to ruin her life. At one point, she accidentally saw the wound and felt guilty. Ariana started to apologize because, if it wasn't for her jewelry, none of this would have happened. To which the prince replied that it was all his fault, so the lady needn't worry. He said it was just a small scratch, and after a few days it would go away. He pretended like it wasn't a problem, when in fact, it hurt a lot. So as not to feel guilty, she said she wanted to help and at least disinfect the wound. Ariana looks into his eyes and tries to see how he reacts to her touch. It's very important to her because any good reaction is the sound of a successful endgame. At that moment, she noticed his smile and was very happy, because she probably had at least one guy who liked her. As a friend, he did something she didn't expect him to do. He got a little pushy, and Ariana seemed a little scared. Initially, she didn't understand what it meant or what he was going to do, but after a few minutes, she didn't even bother to fight back. He openly shows how much he likes her. So all that's left to hear are the words, and only then, mission accomplished. Because of the surprise, she started smiling and pretended as if nothing unusual had happened. She's clearly okay with everything he's hinting at her. They haven't even noticed how they've stopped noticing everyone around them. At this point, the girl couldn't help herself, and started to feel embarrassed. She felt very awkward. But that the guy asked if there was anything she didn't like about it. In response, she tried to hide it, and asked if he could fulfill one request. The girl requested that he look her straight in the eyes and not look away. It's to hear him declare his love. It's a great opportunity to get your way and not waste your time with other guys. Plus, she realized that he already liked her, so all she had to do was hear it. Finally, he continued to look into her eyes and did everything she asked him to do. The girl was very pleased, for it was much quicker and easier than she had expected it to be. Ariana realizes that if she misses this opportunity, she won't get anywhere with the other guys. Since she is not sure of the others, there's no point in waiting for something if now. You can follow through and get what you want. As soon as he looked her in the eyes, he started saying a lot of compliments. But it has nothing to do with her level of charm. He genuinely thinks so, and isn't afraid to say it. Ariana pretended like she very rarely heard it, and didn't expect to hear the compliment at all. After that, he started touching her face again, as if he was hinting at something. But until the girl heard the right words from him, she would continue to pretend as if she didn't understand anything. But she can't hide her surprise. She doesn't know how to behave at this moment so as not to make a mistake. At some point, he wondered what Ariana planned to do next, and if she had any business to attend to. She was surprised and wondered what would be the best answer to that. For until she waited for a declaration of love, she would have no other plans. When she suddenly changed her mind and wanted to run away somewhere. The prince was quick to react and prevented her from doing so. He grabbed her hand and didn't let her run anywhere. He was really curious as to what she didn't like and what he had done wrong. The guy asked why she was trying to run away again without warning, out of fear. The girl replied that he just imagined it. In response, he reminded her that the plan was for them to have a tea party together, so it was too soon to say goodbye. Right after that, he asked her to stop and told her he had a proposition for her. Ariana looked at him and started to hope she was getting it right. She thought about the fact that this was the moment she'd been waiting for. So in order not to jump to conclusions prematurely, she asked what he meant. The guy didn't wait long and immediately confessed that he fell in love with her at first sight. He said that without her, it becomes very difficult for him to enjoy life and see any meaning in it. and when he's with her, he forgets his problems and starts dreaming of a future together. Ariana decided to make sure it wasn't a joke, to which the prince replied that he was completely sincere, which means the girl has accomplished her mission, and just now, one of the main characters confessed his love to her. It's very interesting what she will say and how she will react to such a proposal, because most likely, to make the mission count, she will have to agree and marry him. It turns out that everything is not as simple as it looks from the outside. The prince confessed his feelings not only because he sincerely wanted to. In fact, in addition to this, he wants to avoid marrying the girl his mom found for him. The guy admitted it right away and said he would accept any answer. From this point on, it starts to be like a wedding arrangement, which is very popular in such cases. The prince hopes that the girl can help him and will not refuse to marry him, because if she refuses, he will have to marry someone else. Ariana has never been in this situation and doesn't know how best to proceed. She became very curious if this arrangement would affect her evaluation of her accomplished mission. Too much depends on this answer. The girl is very much afraid that if she gives an answer, she may regret it very much after some time. It's getting harder and harder for him to wait for an answer every minute. You can understand it's very important, but because he's too insistent on answering as soon as possible, the girl becomes even more hesitant and doesn't know what to say. She had waited so long for this proposal, but finally, when it was just a matter of saying yes, she was hesitant and afraid of making a mistake. As soon as she starts to look him in the eye, she feels that if she suddenly decides to refuse, his reaction might be too aggressive. She could sense that the guy was trying his best to look as calm as possible, when in fact, he wasn't at all. To get the girl to agree sooner, he promised that he would provide her with safety and the happiest life she could ever dream of. But there's one very important point. He said it in that strange voice, as if Ariana had no right to refuse. He's gonna make her do it. The girl's trying to look at the situation from the outside and figure out what's best to do. Because if she turns it down, you don't know if it would be as easy to get an offer from someone else. At this point, she felt trapped. The girl is very afraid to refuse, and even more so to anger this man, because there is no telling what can be expected from him in case of refusal. Judging by how much he's advocating for her help, if she refuses, he risks regretting it a lot. I wonder what she'll say, because either way, she's risking something. Ariana decided that if she agreed, there would be far fewer problems than if she refused to help him. She begins to remember the aides coming into her room and how she dreamed of getting such an offer. So, her answer is obvious. She no longer wants to risk her safety and security and be around people she doesn't trust. Since, in addition to marriage, the prince has offered her a luxurious and secure life, she has no reason to doubt, much less refuse such an offer. Because if she can't go back to her old life after the wedding, she can enjoy a quiet life, or it will be much better than being left with nothing. But before she agreed, Ariana decided to let him know to stop being so pushy and forcing her to do it. She did not hold back and began to shout at him, for if he had waited calmly for her answer, she might have agreed much sooner and would not have begun to hesitate. The prince heard this and admitted his mistake and began to apologize. He explained that he didn't mean to sound too aggressive. He was just afraid to hear the rejection. Ariana replied that she just needed some time, because usually in these situations no one responds that fast. She hopes the guy understands that. She had too little time, so it was too difficult to make such an important and responsible choice. Ariana explained everything, and after that, the prince felt much calmer. He started smiling and stopped worrying about it. And in order to get her to agree quickly, as usual, he began to say a great many compliments, and reminded her how important it was to him to get her consent. The girl thought that this moment would happen a little differently. She imagined that the proposal would happen in a calm atmosphere. He wouldn't force an answer as soon as possible, and let you think about it for a while. But unfortunately, there's nothing you can do about it. When suddenly, she decided to run away again. Apparently making a decision right here was a lot harder than it looked. She wants to be alone without anyone looking at her or rushing her. This time he didn't stop her and try to catch up. Finally, the prince realized that she needed some time. Plus, if it's really important to him, he has to agree to whatever terms he wants. If he had let her think about it for a few hours in the beginning, things would have been very different. He made that mistake himself, so we'll have to wait a lot longer for an answer than we might. Meanwhile, Ariana has begun to have very strong doubts. She recalls his persistent stare and is afraid to imagine what she can expect from him. The girl only ran away because she was afraid he wouldn't be able to stand it and start yelling at her. She felt that at any moment anything could happen. When she was about to go to this mansion, the girl could not imagine that at the very last moment she would want to refuse the offer, which she had dreamed of since the first day of her life. In any case, she has already received offer, and her fate depends only on her. It remains to answer yes or no, but as it turns out, it is much more complicated than it seemed a few days ago. Meanwhile, the other guys found out that the girl had gotten a proposal from the prince. This information angered them very much. They didn't like that Ariana ignored their suggestions and chose the prince first. The assistant tried to calm him down, though he understands how unpleasant it is to be in such a situation. The gentleman is not used to rejection, so no wonder he got so angry.